For the next 25 minutes or so, then I'm going to get back into the news and your phone calls. We are joined by Dr. Deborah Cohen, and she is the features editor of the British Medical Journal, probably the most prestigious medical journal in the world, one of the most respected out there. And they have an article, World Health Organization and the Pandemic Flu Conspiracies. Now, going back to February 4th of this year, we had Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg on the syndicated radio broadcast, and he's now stepped down from that position on the rotating post, but he's a medical doctor out of Germany, and he was the head of the European Union Health Commission, and they did find in their hearing that there was a systematic payoffs by the big five vaccine makers to government health spokesmen to come out and scare people and say basically, run for the hills, hundreds of millions may die, take the H1N1. And he also went on to say the H1N1 was unproven and did have bad side effects like Guillain-Barré disorder and did cause some serious health problems. And so that's what the European Union Health Commission found. But separately, there's a detailed, this is a thick, scientific, lengthy report here that was contributed to by quite a few people. And Dr. Deborah Cohen, features editor of the British Medical Journal, joins us from the UK. And Doctor, great to have you on with us on a Sunday. By the way, her report is in ABC News, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. So this is big national news. I'm proud of the fact that we were already trying to get her on before it became national news, her report from the British Medical Journal. So thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you for having me on.
You bet. Now, you've got the floor. Break down in layman's terms, because we're not all doctors like yourself, obviously, what happened and what this investigation shows.
Essentially, it shows how closely the World Health Organization has worked with people that are paid by pharmaceutical companies to develop policy about tackling the pandemic. So it all starts off in 1999 when there were fears coming from Hong Kong about the chicken flu outbreak, and that started in 1997, but they decided to draft some guidance about how to deal with a potential pandemic. Now, the group that they started working with was something called the European Scientific Working Group on Influenza. Now, they published the guidance, and what they didn't say in the guidance, that this working group is 100% pharmaceutical company funded by the manufacturers of vaccines, and also funded by the manufacturers of antivirals, so we have them as Relenza and Tamiflu. And a couple of the people that actually wrote this report, well, one of them in particular was actually promoting Tamiflu on behalf of Roche at the time of writing this report. Then we fast forward slightly to 2004, and this is when the definitive guidance on stockpiling the likes of Relenza and Tamiflu came out, and this was in 2004. The World Health Organization produced a report. Now, this was given to governments around the world. Now, if you cast your mind back to 2005, there was a lot of scare about an avian flu pandemic, and there were deaths in the Far East.
And SARS.
And SARS. So there's a lot of scare around the place, that we did have these outbreaks of illnesses, and there was a lot of scare around the place, and rightly, governments wanted to kind of figure out what they should do about it before it started affecting lots of people. And governments looked to the World Health Organization for guidance and how to deal with these global illnesses. But what we found in our investigation is three key authors, Professor Hayden, who's from the University of Virginia, Dr. Monto, who is from the University of Michigan, and Professor Carl Nicholson, who is from the University of Leicester in the UK. All three of them were on the payroll of pharmaceutical companies when they drafted this key guidance that went out to governments around the world that instructed them to stockpile these drugs. Now, this wasn't made clear by the World Health Organization. If you work for or write for a scientific journal and you're an expert that receives money from the pharmaceutical industry, you're supposed to declare it alongside your article. The WHO didn't do that. Now, what we never established, because I think they should rank slightly is whether the WHO looked into the fact that these people had ties to the pharmaceutical industry, not just any pharmaceutical companies that were set to benefit from mass purchase of these drugs.
Well, a lot of them that made the recommendations, and not just the three chief ones you mentioned, but just from separate reports, would also then got jobs. They would make the recommendations 4, 5, 6 years ago, depending on the incident. Then they would rotate through and get a job at the very company that they recommended that government buy these goods from, and vice versa. And the EU report on it said that it was the World Health Organization, just all of them, UN people getting paid off, doctors getting paid off, just systematic. And then they had state health experts that we found were on the payroll of these wealthy groups, making billions off the vaccine. And then they would have local doctors come out and fearmonger who were also on the payroll. But I know your report just focuses in on the conflict of interest with these key leaders who were top advisors to government. But certainly this coming from the British Medical Journal is going to get a lot of attention. What are you expecting to come from this, if anything? I mean, because obviously just a month or so ago, the World Health Organization said, okay, we did hype things, we did fearmonger, we have lost credibility, sorry we cried wolf, but next time you still need to listen to us.
I think what we hope for it is that the WHO really looks at how they deal and how they use experts with industry ties, really. I mean, what they've got to sit back and think is, how do you feel as a taxpayer, knowing that somebody that is on the payroll of a big pharmaceutical company that is set to make billions out of a drug, how do you feel about them developing your policy? Is that acceptable? And our feeling, it probably isn't acceptable. We have no problem with experts working with industry. We need experts to work with the pharmaceutical industry. We need new drugs. We need to develop.
But they shouldn't be the government experts that make the recommendation on what vaccine to buy.
No, absolutely not. And there should be an absolute firewall. Interestingly enough, the expert that is leading the investigation into the World Health Organization, Dr. Harvey Feinberg, who is from the Institute of Medicine, the U.S. Institute of Medicine, he takes quite a hard line on this, and he actually says that declaring conflicts isn't enough, that actually people with industry ties should not be making policy decisions. And he's actually welcomed the report. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, yeah, because if the medical system does this a couple more times, they're going to lose all credibility.
And that is the danger. And the World Health Organization, rather than deflecting criticism, I think really has to take stock now and say, how are we going to deal with this in the future? And if there is stuff that's gone wrong, and clearly there has been, because there wouldn't be investigations by the European Parliament, by the Council of Europe that produced a report only on Friday as well, by the French government, by the British government, there wouldn't be all these big investigations going on if everything had gone right. And I think there are a couple of things that have gone wrong, but one of the key things has been a lack of transparency. And I don't think, at one point I think people would have accepted that doctors making decisions, they were unquestioned, but we're past that now, and I think we're in a day and age where we want transparency and we expect decision makers to be accountable for their actions. And so hopefully, there will be some good that comes out of this, and we see, and to be fair to the United States, you guys are a lot further ahead than we are in Europe. Your institutions and your universities and your Senate are taking this. Charles Grassley, for example, Republican senator, is taking all this really, really seriously. We're quite far behind in Europe, and we really need to address it here. That's not to say the United States should get complacent.
All right, Dr. Deborah Cohen, one more segment with us, because I've got a few other important questions and other points that you might want to make. It's BMJ.com. British Medical Journal. The article is Who and the Pandemic Flu Conspiracy. Stay with us. We all want good health care we can trust, but having the government take over health care and having the government being basically run by special interest, big pharma, 90+% of our vaccines are now made in China. And you try to say, hey, I don't trust these vaccines, or hey, kids are dying from this Gardasil shot, or major states in Australia have banned, I saw this in the news last week, giving shots to kids under 5 because so many of them were dying. And, now they're not just mandating 5 or 6 vaccines. Now it's 50-plus shots. And these big companies have hundreds of new vaccines a year. They want them all mandated. They want to make you take them all. We're talking to medical doctor Deborah Cohen, a features editor of the British Medical Journal. Detailed report that's been picked up by ABC News. You name it. World Health Organization scientists linked to swine flu vaccine makers. She was telling me during the break that she sees, women's magazines and others quoting experts saying everything's fine, but then she happens to know those experts are on the payroll. I mean, we do have a crisis in confidence. Children's Vaccine Health Center, pig virus DNA found in rotavirus vaccine. FDA says 1 million kids have been given the virus. Studies show it can hurt children, but FDA says no problem. I mean, it's getting crazier and crazier. So we're supposed to question formula from China with melamine, but don't question vaccines from China, Doc?